time. And now I'll start.
Okay.
Welcome everybody back to the Science Festival. I'm Roxanne Truen with the Michigan State University Science Festival, and I'm joined today by Dan Auer from Woldumar Nature Center, and he's going to take us through springtime in Michigan, checking out those spring ephemerals we all love to see as the first sign of spring. So welcome, Dan. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Roxanne. It's great to be here. Like I said, my name's Dan Auer. I'm the program director at Woldumar Nature Center here in Lansing. Just really excited for spring. I know after the long winter we've had, it's great to get outside and see the new life growing. We have an amazing opportunity to see these spring ephemerals as they pop up before the leaves come on the trees. You can see some of them behind me in my background. This picture was taken at Woldumar. So we're really excited to see these spring ephemerals. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the season of spring and why these plants are so important to our overall ecosystem and the functions they play. So let me share my screen. Okay, so let's get started. So a little bit when we think about spring, we want to think about the changes that are happening because we see seasonal changes here in Michigan. So what's going on that affects those seasons? Why are we getting those seasons? So let's see if I can. There we go. Okay. So the big reason that axial tilt is the reasons for our seasons. So here in the Northern Hemisphere, in spring, you can see up here, we start that roughly around March 20th. And we see our planet is tilted at our 23.5 degrees right now. And the sun is lined up perfectly with the equator. So there's an equal amount, there's 12 hours of daylight, 12 hours of darkness as we get there. But that tilt, as it stays in its position as we rotate around the sun, which takes 365 and a fourth day. That's why we have a leap year every 4 years. We've got to make up that fourth day. That tilt will change which hemisphere, either the northern or the southern hemisphere, is closest to the sun. So we realize in our summers, we have longer days. We can, here in Michigan, it doesn't get dark sometimes until way after 10 o'clock. And then in the winter, we are tilted away from the sun. So that tilt is that we have shorter days, and it gets, we don't see the sun until like 8 o'clock and it's going down by 4. It's a short day. Okay. So here's a little better picture of that tilt that I was talking about. So like I said, we have a 23.5 degree tilt right now in our Earth's axis. And so our sun rays are coming in over here and they're hitting the Earth. So in this picture, we can see that the southern hemisphere is pointing towards the sun. So it's getting more light, and the northern hemisphere is pointing away from the sun. So in this picture, we would see it as winter. So we have the sun rays perfectly overhead at the Tropic of Capricorn. Down here in the Arctic Circle, they're experiencing 24 hours of sunlight, which is a really cool thing. So now we move one more group of 3 months, and we reach our spring and fall equinoxes. Okay, so we look at the sun, and it's right above our equator now. So we have these equal amounts of light hitting the Earth throughout the northern and southern hemispheres. And this is a great indicator for animals that are based on length of day. So as we talk about plants and animals, they're cueing into these seasonal changes based on light. So their internal clocks, for lack of a better term, they are cued into these day length night cycles. And if we go 3 more months, And now we have the northern hemisphere up here pointed towards the sun. The sun rays are right above the Tropic of Cancer up here. And we are experiencing our longer days in the northern hemisphere. The Arctic Circle is experiencing those 24-hour day lengths, and the Antarctic Circle is experiencing 24 hours of night. So because nothing in the world is a perfect thing, we don't have a perfect elliptical circle around our sun. We experience a little bit of an oblong shape as we travel around the sun. And because of this, it also affects how we see our seasons. And this can change throughout Earth's history. And sometimes we are closer to the suns at different seasons. So this rotation around the sun doesn't always stay the same. So even though we see this axial tilt, which affects our seasons, we are also seeing times where we are closer to the sun. So perihelios, which actually occurs in January 3rd, we are the closest we are in our rotation around the sun. And of course, that's 147 million kilometers. That's still a really big distance. But because that happens in northern hemisphere, our winter, southern hemisphere summer, we actually get more energy hitting our Earth and warming us up. But because of the unique land features that we see currently on Earth, we have the majority of our land masses in the northern hemisphere. And land warms up a lot faster than water. So if you've ever been out on a warm day like today, it's pretty warm outside if you take a walk. But if you would go near like Lake Michigan, or if you live near a lake, that water is still going to be really cold. So land warms up a lot faster. It soaks in that solar radiation and warms up. Water takes a lot longer to soak in that radiation and warm up. So because we are actually seeing the majority of the surface of the Earth in the southern hemisphere actually be water, it affects our overall global climate. So we actually see a colder period in the Earth's history because we are closer to the sun when the majority of the land mass is in the northern hemisphere. So if we flipped this, we would actually see much warmer summers if we were seeing the perihelios closest to when we're closest to the sun in our summer. So we don't have to worry about that just now, but everything's going to change as we travel through our journey around the sun. And like I said before, many animals and plants are experiencing migration and seasonal changes and hibernation and all these things related to our seasons. And here in North America, we have a great opportunity for animals that can migrate, like our birds, to use these seasonal changes to find areas that are suitable for them. So many of our birds are coming up north right now. So I have this example over here from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and as you see the dots, these are different species of birds that are traveling through their migration at different times. So in October, November, they're heading down south. Now it's in December. And then in January, they're going to start moving back up north. The cool thing here is because the northern part of North America is above, and we even have parts that are above the Arctic Circle, they're going to experience 24 hours of light during our summer. So there's great opportunity for plant growth and raising your young, lots of insects to feed your young if you're a mama bird. But come winter, that becomes a really harsh environment because it's now going to see 24 hours of darkness and be very chilly. So these birds have these migratory pathways, and we call them flyways, that they're moving down towards South America. And the great part about having South America down here, it's in the southern hemisphere. So when we're experiencing winter here in the northern hemisphere, they're experiencing their summer. And so there's a great opportunity for birds that can make that long distance travel to experience summer all year long. There are snowbirds, right? You know, they're able to enjoy our summer, and then when it starts to get chilly, they go down and enjoy the southern hemisphere summer, allowing them to have maximum resources available to them. Here in Michigan, one of my most favorite parts about living here is our spring ephemerals. And ephemeral means short-lived. So these are plants that they do go through their entire life cycle in the few months before leaves start growing on our deciduous trees. So right now is a perfect time if you are a forest floor plant to get a ton of sunlight and be able to complete your life cycle before you're shaded out by our deciduous trees. But that comes with a lot of risk, because you're still going to have to think about, when is it going to be warm enough for me to grow? How am I going to be able to adapt to having a very short growth period? So many of these plants are able to grow before we see an end of our frost. So even just a few weeks, like last week, we had snow, and these plants are able to combat those freezing cold temperatures. Many plants that are herbaceous like this have soft tissues, aren't able to fare very well if their tissues freeze. So these plants have been able to adapt to be able to survive in these cold temperatures and utilize those resources available in the early spring. Of course, one of them being the majority of that sunshine hitting the forest floor. A really cool species on here is our skunk cabbage. And skunk cabbage, and you can see that flower down there, that hooded flower, it can actually use cellular respiration to create some heat around its flower to melt the snow and be able to grow and attract its pollinator to pollinate that flower. The reason that these flowers are adapted to this is they want to be the first resource available to these pollinators. They know they have a captive audience for all of these insects that are just emerging this time of year looking for food. And so they don't have to compete with other flowers that might have more nectar or more reward to the pollinators. So since they have the market share, there's nothing else blooming at this time, these flowers are going to get pollinated. And so because these plants take so much energy to grow really quickly in the spring, they're adapted to be able to survive in the full sun available in the spring in these cold temperatures. As soon as it starts to warm up later in spring, these plants would then die and be finished with their life cycle. They can't handle the warmer weather, and they also can't handle the deep shade once the leaves come on the trees. And you can imagine if you're a plant and has to complete your life cycle in only a month, you're going to have to just live fast, and you're going to put a lot of energy into that process. And you're not going to probably have a lot of stored extra. So this is why some of these plants are some of the most imperiled species that we see here in Michigan, because they do not handle disturbance very well. They don't have enough stored energy to survive if they potentially get stepped on by a human or eaten by an animal. A great example of this is our trillium, which you can see in the top middle. Trillium is a beautiful flower. We think of it as one of those iconic spring ephemerals, and has that beautiful white flower. And all of the energy that plant has stored in its roots from last year is sent into growing its new leaves in that flower. If this spring that plant is eaten or stepped on, it doesn't have enough energy to regrow and never will. It's completely dead. So it really is important to be very careful when you're walking around in the spring and to protect these natural areas, because these species are extremely important to our early pollinators, which are important for food crops, of course. And they're very sensitive. They come in a wide variety. Pretty much any natural area you get out to, you'll see these. All of these pictures here were taken at Woldumar. So we have a wide variety of violets, even the violets that grow in your yard possibly are spring ephemerals. They're going to start coming up and blooming. One of my favorites is our trout lily, or dogtooth violet is another name for it. And it has these really beautiful mottled leaves that you can see right here, and a yellow flower. Sometimes the flower can be white, but that's pretty uncommon. May apple is another one. It has these really cool umbrella-shaped leaves that come up, and then the flower will be underneath these leaves. And finally, one of my other favorites is this bloodroot. And it gets its name because it actually has a sap that's very red and looks like blood if you damage the root. Another important thing to be aware of when we're out in natural areas is the impact of invasive species on these plants. So two invasive species that we have to think of that have a really hard effect on our spring ephemerals is garlic mustard and Dame's rocket. An invasive species is categorized by a non-native species. So in both of these cases, they are not originally found in North America. And if they're invasive, they cause either harm to a natural community, harm to an economic importance to human life, or toxic in some sort of way. Both garlic mustard and Dame's rocket are early blooming species. They grow early in the spring. Many of them will keep their leaves throughout the entire winter. So they have an early start to growing in spring. And both of these produce what's an allelopathic chemical. Their roots produce a chemical which suppresses other things, other plants from growing close to it, which is a great survival tactic if you're living in an area where you have lots of competition and you need to outcompete. Because these plants aren't native here, our local indigenous plants don't have a way to survive against those chemicals, and so they die. And the garlic mustard and the Dame's rocket take over. Not all is lost. Through the great work of the Midwestern Invasive Species Network and other organizations like the stewardship groups and conservation corps and our local SISMAs, they are doing amazing work to help control these invasive species. And you can do a lot of work too as a citizen science to help with these. So come spring, reach out to your local cooperatives, your local nature centers, and see what they're doing to work on garlic mustard and Dame's rocket removal. Here at Woldumar, we have a self-service packet we can send you if you're interested that explains what the two species are and where they're found on the property. We'll send you some training modules from MISCENT that you can sit down and work through at your own pace to educate yourself on two species and what other things might look like it that are good plants. So you don't want to pull you don't want to pull the good stuff and you want to pull the bad stuff. And then the way you remove these. So the great part is both of these species can be hand removed. Really easy just by grabbing them by the base and pulling the root out. And garlic mustard is really nice. It was actually brought over because it's an herb and you can eat it. Many people make a pesto out of the leaves. So if you're looking to help our natural communities and get a little tasty pesto out of the deal, you can help with a garlic mustard pull. Dame's rocket is not edible, but it is a beautiful flower. I know many people will go and pull the plant and then make a nice bouquet out of it, and then make sure they throw these plants away when they're done with it. And then as you are finished pulling these plants, it's really important to bag them up in trash bags and then throw them away in the garbage. Or if you have a really good composting system, but you got to get the compost super hot to kill the seeds in this. So the best way is to get rid of these is to actually put them in the trash and have them sent to the landfill. Well, that was my presentation. Thank you guys so much for attending. I'll open it up to any questions you might have. If you're looking to get in contact with me about any of our spring ephemerals at Woldumar or interested in invasive species work, you can reach me at programs@woldumar.org. I also have a YouTube video that we did last year of me walking through the property, explaining and showing the different spring ephemerals that you can find here. So if you're not able to get out or just looking for a nice guided hike that you can watch from YouTube, check out our YouTube page at Woldumar Videos. There's also some other guided hikes on there as well. So thank you guys so much, and I'd love to answer any questions.
If you have any questions for Dan, you can put them in the Q&A if you're on Zoom, or if you're listening to us on Facebook Live, you can put them in the comments section. And we'll hang out for a few minutes. I have one question for you, Dan. If you want to pull garlic mustard at Woldumar, do you need to stop into the office first and ask permission?
Yeah, in our case, because we want to make sure it's safe for everybody in the COVID times that we're in, we ask that you send us an email first. We'll send you that information and schedule a time for you to come out so that you are just interacting with your family while you pull garlic mustard or James Rocket. So you won't have any interaction with our staff, but we'll supply all the resources that you need to feel ready to tackle those invasive species. And you can do it whenever is the best time for you.
Okay, and then do they bring their own bags, and do they leave the bags with you to put in the landfill, or should they take them with them?
Yeah, if you want to bring your own trash bags, you can. We could also supply you with some trash bags. And then we have a dumpster on site that we will dispose of it. So we ask that once the bags are full, we have a designated spot next to our trailhead. You can leave the bags, and then one of our Woldumar staff members will take it over to the dumpster for you.
Awesome. So I know we were talking about spring ephemerals, but what other kinds of things are happening now at Woldumar since it's spring? Have you seen any critters or heard any of like the spring peepers or anything?
Yeah, so vernal pools are an amazing sign of spring as well. So these are the pools of water that are only found in the spring, and many of our amphibians use these pools to spawn and lay their eggs in the spring. So we are hearing a lot of spring peepers, and our chorus frogs and our wood frogs are going right now. So any hike that you do on a warm day, you will be there's a deafening sense of the frogs ready for spring. You can hear them pretty much anywhere at Woldumar. We're also seeing a lot of our garter snakes come up, and they also do their reproduction in the spring as well. If you're lucky, you can actually see what's called a mating ball of garter snakes, and they all come together in this slithering pile of snakes. I've never seen it personally. I've seen videos of it, but it's a really cool sign of spring. But it's a good thing to know that these cold-blooded animals are just getting out of their hibernation for the spring and might not be as fast as they normally are. So just keep an eye out for them. Most of the time, they are just trying to get out of your way. I know I worry about stepping on them, and I'll jump a little bit, but they just want to find their first meal and find their mate and avoid getting stepped on by you.
All right, with that, I think we are out of time, but thank you again for taking part in the Science Festival. We hope people get outside to nature. And just to highlight, we're doing an April Bio Blitz, which is to get outside in nature, use the iNaturalist app and take pictures of what you see out there and upload them to the MSU Science Festival Bio Blitz page or to the Woldumar Bio Blitz page. We want to see how many things we can observe and identify throughout the month of April. And then we have another 28 days of activities with the Science Festival. So check at our website, and we hope to see you at other presentations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.